I was being brought to set in a wheelchair. Like, I couldn't walk that far. So I had to tell everybody because I needed help. You know, I needed someone to help me stand, and I needed someone to help. I needed someone to help me to get there.
For years, the question haunted the entertainment world like an unresolved subplot. Would the Bundy family ever reunite? Fans who had grown up watching Married, with children dreamed of seeing their favorite dysfunctional family return to television just one more time. And after months of speculation, whispered discussions, and behind-the-scenes negotiations, it finally happened. The reunion special aired to record-breaking viewership numbers. The cast came together, older now, softer around the edges, but unmistakably the same people who had captured America's heart decades earlier. It was everything fans hoped it would be. But what nobody expected was what Christina Applegate would reveal in the aftermath. 3 weeks after the reunion aired, Christina sat down for a candid interview that would change everything. When asked about her experience returning to the set with Ed O'Neill, she paused. There was a moment of silence that seemed to stretch forever. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared to speak about something she had kept private for nearly 40 years. What she revealed was not scandalous in the traditional sense. It was not designed to hurt anyone or settle old scores. Instead, it was a profound and deeply human truth about what had really happened between her and Ed during those formative years, and what had happened since. Christina began by talking about the moment she walked back onto the recreated set for the reunion taping. Standing there surrounded by the familiar props, the couch where so many scenes had taken place, the kitchen where countless moments of the Bundy family's chaos had unfolded, she was transported back in time. But the journey was not merely nostalgic. It was emotional in ways she had never anticipated. She saw Ed across the room, and something shifted inside her. All at once, she was 15 years old again, standing on a real Hollywood set for the first time, terrified and unsure of herself. And there was Ed, watching her with those eyes that always seemed to say, "You're going to be okay." What Christina exposed was that Ed had done something for her that went far beyond what anyone knew. In the early years of the show, when she was navigating both adolescence and sudden fame simultaneously, Ed had essentially created a protective bubble around her. But it was not a suffocating kind of protection. Instead, it was the kind that allowed her to grow while ensuring she was never left alone to fend off the darker aspects of the industry. Christina revealed that Ed had fought with producers on her behalf multiple times. There were moments when the script called for things that made her uncomfortable, and Ed would step in during rehearsals and suggest modifications that would maintain the joke without exploiting her youth or sexuality. The most striking revelation came when Christina discussed what happened during a particularly difficult period in her personal life. When she was 17 years old, her family was going through a significant crisis. Her parents were struggling with serious issues, and Christina found herself carrying an emotional burden that no teenager should have to bear. She came to the set one day, and while she tried to hide her distress behind professionalism, Ed somehow knew. He didn't ask her about it directly. Instead, he invited her to grab lunch after work. During that meal, Ed told her stories about his own family struggles, about navigating hard times, about learning to separate what happened at home from what you brought to work. He never pretended to have all the answers, but he gave her permission to struggle while still showing up as a professional. That conversation, Christina revealed, quite possibly saved her during one of the darkest periods of her adolescence. But there was more. Christina exposed that Ed had been financially generous to her in ways that had never been public knowledge. When she decided to hire her first acting coach to improve her craft, Ed not only recommended someone, but he also helped pay for it initially, refusing to let her tell anyone about his contribution. Years later, when Christina was going through financial difficulties as a young actress struggling to book roles outside of the show, Ed quietly helped her secure a small personal loan through contacts he knew, asking nothing in return and making her promise not to tell him how she spent the money. These were not grand gestures made for publicity. They were private acts of generosity from a man who simply wanted to help a young person he cared about survive and thrive in a brutal industry. Christina also revealed the painful complexity of their relationship over the years. She talked about how, after married, with children ended, she and Ed had drifted for a period. This was not because of any conflict or betrayal. It was simply the natural result of two people moving on with their lives, building separate careers, making new connections. But Christina exposed the guilt she had carried for years about this distance. She worried that Ed felt abandoned or forgotten. She worried that the bond they had built on that set had been just another Hollywood connection that faded with time. When she finally reconnected with him after several years of minimal contact, she was shocked to discover that Ed had never felt the way she feared. He told her that he understood life happens, that people grow apart, and that what mattered was whether the foundation was real. He believed their foundation was real. Christina revealed that hearing him say this lifted a weight from her that she had carried in silence for a decade. The most vulnerable moment of Christina's exposure came when she discussed what happened when she told Ed about her MS diagnosis. Christina revealed that her biggest fear at that moment was not the disease itself, but the thought of being a burden to the people she cared about. She worried that the man who had supported her through so much would see her illness as something that would require him to sacrifice further. When she finally worked up the courage to tell Ed, expecting sympathy and possibly some awkward distance, she got something completely different. Ed cried. Not for her, but with her. He told her that she had spent her entire career playing a character that society had written for her. He said that the real Christina, the one he had known since she was 15 years old, was someone who faced adversity with courage and authenticity. He said that her MS diagnosis would not change his feelings for her or his commitment to supporting her in whatever way she needed. Christina exposed the specific ways Ed had shown up for her after her diagnosis. He had attended her medical appointments with her, not to hover or control, but to be there. He had researched MS extensively, not to become her expert, but so he could have intelligent conversations with her about what she was experiencing. He had shared his own health struggles with her, things she never knew about, to let her know that vulnerability and facing bodily challenges was something all humans eventually experienced. He had publicly defended her against insensitive comments and had used his platform to raise awareness about her condition and MS in general. Christina revealed that she had once asked him why he did all of this, why he invested so much energy in someone who was no longer his castmate or professional obligation. His answer was simple: because she mattered to him. Because the person she was now mattered just as much as the person she had been at 15. But Christina also exposed something uncomfortable about their relationship, something that the public narrative had never quite captured. She talked about how the father-daughter dynamic they had developed, while genuine, had also created expectations and pressure in both directions. Christina revealed that she sometimes felt like she had to be strong for Ed, like she had to show him that his investment in her had paid off, that she had become the successful person he had believed she could be. She had felt a responsibility to make his faith in her feel justified. Ed, for his part, had sometimes struggled with allowing Christina to make her own mistakes without trying to guide or protect her. There was a period in her 20s when Christina made some career choices that Ed disagreed with, and it created tension between them because they were both adjusting to a relationship dynamic where she was no longer the mentee but a fully formed adult woman. Christina exposed that it took years of maturing and ongoing communication to navigate these complexities. They had to learn how to be themselves with each other, not the versions that fit the mentor-student or father-daughter paradigm. They had to develop the kind of friendship that allowed for disagreement without threat, for independence without distance. It was not something that happened automatically or easily. It required intention and work from both of them. The most surprising exposure came when Christina talked about the reunion itself. She revealed that seeing Ed on that set again, falling into their old rhythms, playing their old scenes, had been unexpectedly healing for her. The reunion was not just about reliving nostalgia or satisfying fan curiosity. For Christina, it was about circling back to something foundational in her life and recognizing how far she had come, how strong she had become, and how grateful she was for the person who had helped her get there. She talked about a moment during the taping when she flubbed a line, and Ed, without missing a beat, improvised something that made her laugh so hard she could barely continue. In that moment, she realized that their connection had survived 4 decades, a chronic illness diagnosis, life changes, career shifts, and the inevitable trials of a long friendship. It had survived because it was built on something real. Christina concluded her exposure by talking about what she wanted people to understand about relationships that span decades. She wanted people to know that the most meaningful connections in our lives are not always romantic or immediately dramatic. Sometimes the most powerful relationships are the quiet ones, the sustained ones, the connections that show up over and over again without fanfare. She wanted to expose the idea that mentorship and chosen family could be just as vital and transformative as biological family. She wanted people to understand that it was possible to love someone deeply and platonically, to be changed by someone's presence in your life, to owe a debt of gratitude that could never be fully repaid. Most importantly, Christina exposed the truth that everyone needed an Ed O'Neill in their life. Someone who saw your potential before you could see it yourself. Someone who protected you without controlling you. Someone who let you become yourself while still being there through every transformation. She talked about how rare it was to find people like this, how precious such connections were, and how grateful she was that her teenage self had been placed in the presence of someone with the wisdom and kindness to step into that role authentically. As the interview concluded, Christina reflected on what the reunion and her subsequent revelations had taught her. She had spent years worrying about being perceived as ungrateful or demanding. She had spent years keeping these truths private out of fear of seeming sentimental or overwrought. But the reunion had given her permission to finally say what had always been true. Ed O'Neill had changed her life. Not in the way that mentors sometimes claim credit for their students' success, but in the way that genuine human love changes a life. He had showed her what it meant to be seen, to be protected, to be believed in. Those gifts had shaped everything she had become. Like, subscribe, and follow for more.